Welcome to the Silver Wolf Howl. I am Angela, and today we are chatting to Sias Strydom, the Chief Operating Officer at DML Forensics. Today, Ryan and I are back at the offices of DML Forensics, but this time we are chatting to Sias Strydom, and I've really been looking forward to this interview as well. He is the Chief Operating Officer here, and I'm very curious to hear all his stories and more about him. So, hi Sias, thank you for joining us today and for allowing us to come back again.
Good morning, Angela. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to be part of your podcast.
So for those who missed our last episode, or the ones who just want a recap, could you give us a brief summary of what DML Forensics is about?
Sure, Angela. So DML Forensics is a forensics firm which was established by the directors of Dingley Marshall Lewin. It's actually a Cape Town-based law firm, and they were established in 2008 already. The directors recognize a need for forensic services within the legal environment and decided to establish DML Forensics. So DML Forensics provides clients in the public and private sectors, both locally and internationally, with a cost-effective forensic solution that is tailored to their specific needs. We understand that we are assisting clients during difficult times, so our experience and our multidisciplinary team ensures that all matters are dealt with, with the appropriate sensitivity, confidentiality, and integrity.
Okay, great. So what makes all of those services unique to DML Forensics?
Well, forensic investigations that we conduct is primarily focused on white-collar crime. So white-collar crime is non-violent crime committed by white-collar workers, such as fraud, theft, and corruption. However, there are a plethora of other crimes, such as bribery, money laundering, embezzlement, counterfeiting, insider trading, espionage, Ponzi schemes, identity theft, and other cyber crimes. White-collar crime are usually perpetrated by individuals at the corporate level. So due to the sophisticated technology available nowadays, even white-collar crimes committed by an individual may result in tens of millions in losses for the victims. So we provide forensic services to our clients to determine the cause and effect of the crimes. And during our investigation process, we review documents and information, interview key role players, and several other investigative processes to obtain evidence to confirm the allegations made, after which we draft a report setting out what we have done and to provide our clients with the results of the investigation. Our services, usually result in one of the following: disciplinary action, criminal action, civil action, or a combination of those. So during these processes, we provide expert testimony in disciplinary hearings or in a court. There are also investigation support services that we provide, such as polygraph testing, handwriting analysis, psychometric testing, and cyber forensic services. We might talk about that a bit later. Another range of services we provide is one of the proactive side of things, such as policy development and verification, business and candidate vetting, that's part of the due diligence process, and fraud and corruption risk assessments. So we assist companies to establish their fraud prevention plans and strategies. Linked to that is detection plans as well as response plans. And we also provide fraud and corruption awareness training.
Yeah, I can imagine that technology has changed the face of all of these crimes as well. So what is your role at DML Forensics?
Well, as COO, I'm responsible to ensure we have enough work for all our staff, and I assist with business development. I also oversee the operational activities and is responsible for quality control of the work we do. But the bulk of my time is spent on conducting specialized forensic investigations.
Okay, so then how does your expertise and what you do fit into a case?
The work I do is strategically focused to ensure we provide the best service possible for our clients. For this reason, I work closely with the rest of the investigation team in order to guide them so that we can determine who the perpetrators are, what they have done, and to quantify the financial loss to the client. It is also very important to establish what sort of resource we require and to ensure that the team of investigators can deliver, good results.
Okay, I understand. So, Sias, tell us a little bit more about you. What is your background?
I started out as an internal auditor before deciding to specialize in forensic investigations. So I worked for Ernst & Young for many years, as well as a few smaller accounting and forensic firms, until I became a forensic practitioner. Thereafter, I started my own forensic services businesses. Well, that was in 2010, and recently I decided to merge with DML Forensics.
Okay, so you were in internal auditing. What made you get into this business?
I thoroughly enjoyed internal auditing, however, needed something more exciting. Many members of my family worked as, police officials, and perhaps that steered me into this direction. Funny enough, the first forensic assignment I went on was terrible. It was in no man's land, and I hated it. Strangely enough, I persisted and discovered the joy of contributing towards the fight against crime.
I'm glad the Hamadulas didn't put you off and that you stuck with it and that you're still in this industry now. Would you say your journey was more of a sequence of events, that led you to doing the work you do now and where you are now? Or was it more of a typical road that you followed?
No, I don't think it was a typical road at all. When I decided to go into forensics, it was a new field in the market, and there was not even governing body for forensics in South Africa. So the fact that forensics require a person with, an analytical mind, my background of understanding systems, processes, risks, and controls gave me an advantage to become a successful forensic investigator.
So I'm going to dare to say that you were kind of like the pioneer in this whole industry, one of the first ones then. So what are some of your more common or typical cases that you deal with now daily?
Strange enough, the cases that I deal with on a daily basis are not really common or typical at all. Each and every case is unique and different, although some of the basics might be the same. The most common cases would be fraud, theft, and misconduct, such as employees stealing from the company in some way or another, or not abiding by the policies and procedures of the company. It also includes procurement fraud and various online scams. Two challenges that comes to mind is having a constant flow of work and the slow functioning of our justice system. Due to the fact that crime occurs in an unscheduled manner, it is difficult to plan projects and forecast ahead. I always laugh and say, we either have too much work or nothing at all. It is not a type of business with regular flow of work. It goes, quiet sometimes, and sometimes it's just plain hectic. So the other challenge, is seeing the results of our efforts. Although we produce reports containing our findings and evidence, criminal matters lodged with the SAPS sometimes take years to finalize. The SAPS, they have the power to investigate and is required to investigate and refer matters to the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA. And the NPA has various core business units to assist with conducting investigations and obtaining evidence in cases of fraud and corruption. So these units include, if I recall correctly, asset forfeiture unit, there's the special commercial crimes unit, and the investigating directorate. That's mainly the three divisions. So in South Africa, the NPA has the sole discretion to decide on whether to prosecute a matter. The NPA will make the decision based on the evidence, the strength of the case, and the nature of the conduct to ultimately decide if it's in the interest of justice to prosecute. So due to the number of fraud cases in South Africa, the SAPS and the NPA are currently overwhelmed with cases.
Yeah, that's so true. I heard from quite a few sources and our own experience with our business as well. What do you find most satisfying about your work?
To me, is that every day is different and every investigation is different. Although the principles, remain the same, each investigation's circumstances, are different. A case that comes to mind, which was most satisfying over the years, was an investigation into money laundering. Maybe I can mention that to you. So money laundering is this concealment of the origins of a illegally obtained money, typically, by means of transfers involving foreign banks or even a legitimate business. So we were appointed to investigate a company which was providing financial advice, and that they weren't registered with the Financial Service Bureau, the FSB. So soon we realized that this company was part of a larger group, and we actually at that time we utilized I2 Analyst Notebook. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But we captured all the details of all the related companies, and the individuals to determine links between them. That's what that software does. It's actually really nice. You put all the cell phone numbers in there, addresses, etc., and then it's easy to pick up the links with other individuals and companies. So after months of work, we identified that many of these companies obtained funds through various criminal activities and then filtered it through these companies to look as if it was, the companies that was actually making the profits. So at the end, the whole scheme was reported to the FSB and to the SAPS, and the perpetrators were fortunately arrested. Although it took several years to finalize the criminal proceedings, some of the perpetrators were sentenced to 15 years in prison. And some of the companies that was involved, they had to pay huge fines. In general, a person convicted of these offences can be fined up to 100 million South African rands, or, even being sentenced to imprisonment, for up to 30 years.
Wow, yikes. One would think that would discourage them from committing these crimes, but it doesn't seem to at all. So you then have to be involved with or dealing with colorful characters, should I say. So is there an element of danger or risk to you in your current position as part of this investigative team?
Unfortunately, yes. However, the risk is very low, due to the way we conduct our investigations. So although we deal with non-violent crimes, there's always a possibility for a suspect to become emotionally unstable or even hostile. Other instances exist where we uncover criminal activities and the suspects, threaten us to, in the hope that we'll be despondent. But in these circumstances, we gather as much as evidence as possible and engage with the SAPS to actually further those investigations.
I'm curious about your fraud and corruption awareness training service that you offer here at DML Forensics. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, fraud and corruption awareness training, usually takes place at more, corporate level, especially large companies, that's got, quite a number of staff. And what we basically do is, we develop basically awareness material, and then we do campaigns, going around to, say, all their depots or all their offices, just introducing, fraud and corruption to their staff members, because, everybody hears about fraud and corruption, but they don't always know exactly what it entails, especially bribery as well. People sometimes think, bribery, that only happens, in Africa somewhere, but, there's many forms of bribery. And so we basically unpack that for them and just in a nice way, make them aware of all the aspects of fraud, corruption, as well as bribery.
I'm so glad I asked that question, because my initial thought was, does this really make a difference? Would it really make a difference? And it obviously does. And your explanation kind of answered that question for me. So it's great that training does then affect the amounts of this kind of criminal activity that happens. Another service that you offer is the transaction monitoring and reporting, detection and reporting of suspicious activity. Could you tell us a little bit more about that one?
Yes, so transaction monitoring, that's especially where you've got businesses that, have quite a few transactions. They've got large systems, with red flags, and sometimes you have to actually go do an evaluation of that system and all the red flags that it produces, all those variance reports. So what we do is we actually go in and review those variance reports and study it to see, where are the real red flags and what type of transaction is out of place. So, we basically detect, any suspicious activity there. And at the end, we produce a report to the company or the client and say, listen, we suspect that, these are out of the norm. Let's go investigate it further. And then they will decide, whether they want us to investigate it. But in many instances, it's, especially if you've got large sets of data, once you've done that assessment and you get those red flags, it's always an issue because, you see it just, easily. So we do those transaction monitoring and then, we report on it.
Let's chat a little bit about your connection with Dingley Marshall Lewin law firm.
As mentioned earlier, DML Forensics was established by the directors of Dingley Marshall Lewin, a Cape Town-based law firm. This is where we derive our name from. Their areas of expertise are administrative and constitutional law, commercial property law, competition law, consumer law, and a range of others. You're welcome to visit their website. It's www.dmllaw.co.za. And ours is www.dmlforensics.co.za. So these two companies support one another and, as and when needed, as many of the cases we investigate requires legal assistance or their clients, sometimes require forensic assistance.
I see Ryan is looking curious. I think he's got a question to ask you as well.
Sias, for our listeners out there, it sounds like this is almost like a scarce skill that you guys have. How can a listener be at school now or someone that is studying law or forensics, how can they get into coming to work for you? What will the requirements be for them to be able to qualify for that?
Thanks for that question, Ryan. I think there's definitely different fields that one can go into. It's not just forensic investigations. You can join, our firm by becoming an accountant, forensic accountant. You can become a lawyer. That's obviously also part of what we do. You can become a cybercrime expert, and go into, computer type of degrees and qualifications. And then obviously if you want to do forensic investigations or specialize in that, most of the tertiary institutions, for example, universities, they have now forensic accounting degrees, so you can go do that, or you can go to the colleges and, they have modules in forensic investigations. So there's quite a number of things you can do. Obviously, it depends on, whether we have capacity or an opening for a person. From time to time, we definitely, need people with different skill sets. But with a combination of, being analytical minded and, there's quite a few other things that, the universities and colleges don't teach you. But that's, why you need to come work with us and, gain that experience.
All of those sound like really interesting career paths to follow. Really cool. So as we know, being investigators, it's usually a serious matter, investigations. But sometimes you have those stories that are just funny and then you kind of wonder, am I doing an investigation or what? Have you had something that you can think of to share with us now that kind of falls into that category?
Yeah, right, Angela. In most cases it is serious. However, one investigation was somewhat funny. We were appointed to do an investigation into a sweets manufacturer based in South America. And our investigation team traveled abroad to interview relevant individuals and obtain the required evidence. And during this process, we did a walkthrough of their facilities, their warehouses and so on, and which was quite interesting, actually, especially to see how they make sweets. The warehouses were full of bags of white sugar. And knowing the background of certain South American countries, our first thoughts were that maybe these bags of sugar weren't really bags of sugar, but we were assured it was. So what happened, when we finished the investigation on our return to South Africa, we needed additional suitcases to transport the documentation we obtained. And the company that we worked for offered us a few suitcases, and we gladly accepted it, because we had to rush to the airport, actually. And before takeoff, because it's overseas trips, there's some time that you sit in the plane and just wait. And I remember I was, our team wasn't sitting in one row or anything. We were scattered around the plane. But I saw this person next to me. The air hostess came to him and said, "Listen, sir, you actually need to go off, of the plane." And so he said, "Okay, well, I'll just leave my stuff here." And she said, "No, take all your stuff with you." And I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. Eventually, I can't remember if he came back, but I think I fell asleep, and eventually we took off. But the next morning we realized what has happened. They actually asked a couple of people on board. It's almost like they took a sample of people to be offloaded, and they actually checked their luggage. And then we realized that two of our staff members were also offloaded, and their luggage was searched. And then only we realized that, the suitcases that we used, we didn't know if it contained any illegal substances. Technically, we don't know who packed it. I mean, we shoved the files and stuff we had in there, but I mean, it could have been zips or, areas that anything could have, been added to it. And, we didn't know if there was any illegal substances, carried previously in those suitcases. So it was actually quite interesting. But fortunately, all the team members were released eventually, and we were on our way, and we had quite a big laugh about it the next day.
I was really wondering where the story was going with the white powder sugar and all of that. Thanks so much for sharing your story and for giving us your time today. I know for one that I learned quite a bit, and I'm sure Ryan did as well. So thank you for having us here again. It looks like we're going to have to apply for permanent residency at your office. But thank you so much for being as welcoming as ever, and for your time and letting us chat to you.
Thank you very much, Angela and Ryan. I mean, we really appreciate talking to you guys. It's always fun, and we're very passionate about what we do. And we would love for people to know more about forensics. And thank you very much for your time.